Welcome back, and John, you have your own show over at Republic Radio, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, Monday to Friday. Can you give us a summary of some of the show topics you've covered in the past week or two? And if they go over to Republic Radio, they can actually listen to them or in the archives. What are some of the main shows you've covered lately?
Well, Professor McCanney's become a weekly guest on my show, and of course we talk about matters involving astrophysics and related topics. Always fascinating. This morning I was talking about, briefly before we brought Ann Morrison on board, it appears that a contrived economic collapse is becoming ever more clear to be a reality. And, of course, with Ann Morrison today, we were talking about all these seismic events and related topics going on around the world.
Yeah, the contrived financial events. Let's look at some mathematics, because I tell people math is a subject that kids should never skip in school. They need to teach it better. They need to get people to get excited about it, because if you talk about math is in a sense, the queen of science. They refer to it as the queen of science. And the king can't get away without things without the queen approving it. So without math, whether statistics or astrophysics or chemistry, you need math. Same with politics. The math of this is that they set up the fiscal cliff as a way of dealing with an overspending government that did illegal wars, that also had the pork barreling, so that a jet that could cost $40 million cost $240 million. Basically, all the kind of payoffs to all the political contributions, because of crony capitalism is so bad and the district are criminals. And it's sucking us dry. It's like having a giant blood-sucking monster on us, on the body politic of the population. So 40%, for example, of the value of all of our goods, services, and intellectual property is sucked away by the Federal Reserve and by this giant blood-sucking monstrosity called the government. The government's sucking us dry, and the problem is the body politic of society is about to hit the wall. The fact is, if they tax 100% of the income of people making over $250,000, you would only keep the government going for a matter of days. The real problem is that neither Obama wants to reduce entitlements, nor the Republicans want to raise taxes, but that's not the real issue. They need to write off the debt. They need to say, oh, this $18 trillion, this is all false and bogus. We need to have state banks, and we need to have a federal U.S. Reserve Bank that doesn't have any foreigners involved, and we don't need to feel committed to send trillions of dollars to Europe that won't manage their own budget. It's ridiculous.
Well, Dr. Bill, if they repudiate the debt, they'll never sell another treasury bond for a century. So obviously they can't do that. They need some mechanism to make it look like an outside foreign enemy. Perhaps Iran would be a good choice, or maybe North Korea. Had computer hackers destroy our banking community from without. And that would be pushing the reset button to start over again.
Well, there's going to be a reset one way or the other. It'll happen, as they say, it's going to either happen good or bad. And the good analogy would be, I remember years ago I actually saw a remarkable incident. I saw a person that fell 10,000 feet. Literally, their chute didn't open, their parachute. They literally aimed themselves and then bounced off the branches of a tree, rolled off a roof, and landed on bushes and only broke about 6 ribs, had a few compression fractures of the spine, didn't get paralyzed or even get a serious cervical or neck injury, and no spinal cord damage. Now, we're going to crash either way, but we got to figure out how we're going to crash. What I suspect needs to happen is we need Glass-Steagall back up, we need to have banks in every state, and we need a parallel credit system where the states can start getting their own credit so they can get their house in order, whether it's backed by gold or just by the productivity of the state. We also need to start putting the brakes on the federal government, either illegal wars, crazy spending, and trying to buy elections. We can see that Obama did buy this election, and he also did executive orders, which should have been through the first 2 years of his term when he had a clear mandate to set up rapid immigration. When this group came to the White House a few days ago and said they wanted to have him pass an executive order to stop discrimination, that's something that the Congress needs to address, not an executive order from the commander-in-chief. This is like trying to set up Obama as an emperor, and it's really dangerous.
It is. It is absolutely dangerous, and we're establishing a lot of very dangerous precedents with this president.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre kind of arrangement. And your comments on this, because I think post-election we have the Electoral College needs to be reformed. I don't believe that this secession movement, and I know that Joel Skousen has written on this, is really valid. People need to realize what you need to do is you need to reform the banking structure, and what you want to do is you're going to have to repudiate the debt. I mean, that I don't care if the U.S. sells treasury bonds to other countries. We don't need it. We're sitting on mountains of oil and gas that the world needs. If we simply even had the export licenses, which Obama won't give, to these U.S. companies, we could sell enough oil and gas that our debt would just go poof. And then we wouldn't even need to worry about repudiating debt. It would just disappear. But Obama is standing in the way of America, literally a new renaissance in America, or he wants to pork barrel it so that he can pass out more goodies to guarantee that either he or a proxy will get reelected for a third term. And they're now talking about that. Your comments, John?
Well, the people, many of the entities that the debt is owed to have tremendous control over this country by hook or by crook. So I don't believe it's going to be a very easy thing to do. And the Chinese, of course, own a huge amount of this debt. And
but they also owe us money. They owe us money too, though. I actually had an expert on a few months ago that showed that they actually owe us quite a bit more, double the money that we owe them in terms of trillions of dollars loaned actually before the Communist Revolution. But they say they repudiate the debt. The fact is that the precedent is, except for maybe Royal several hundred years ago, that all modern nations still own the debt. And the Chinese owe us many trillions of dollars. In fact, quite a bit more than we still owe them. And I know there's interlocking world debt, but people say, we owe it to the Chinese. Our debt is not measured in a couple trillion that the Chinese have. It's in hundreds of trillion. We're talking about probably, total off-the-book debt is more like 1.4 to 1.5 quadrillion dollars. That's 1,400 to 1,500 trillion. So the Chinese debt is a little itty-bitty tiny fraction. It's for public consumption, so we allow things like the Idaho trade zone given to the Chinese, or we pass over 90% of the oil to the Chinese company, the China Oil Company, that's now the fifth largest oil and gas petrochemical refiner in the world that didn't exist before Gulf War II. I think it's part of the game of the globalists to try to set up a dialectic so they can manipulate us into a position like Clinton did, transferring supercomputer weapon systems and advanced military technology. So the JL-17 and the Chinese stealth jets now are virtually a combination of the F-22 Raptor and F-35. To me, this is obscene. Everything from space technology is like a big bazaar. Hey, Clinton said, come on down and we'll give you all this stuff. It's like, what? The globalists basically, even after the Second World War, gave nuclear technology and materials and shuttled it through Fairbanks, Alaska, to the Russians when they didn't have enough nuclear materials to make a bomb.
That's
right. What I see happening is the globalists basically are literally raping and pillaging us and giving our technology and intellectual property to these characters. And Obama is continuing in that vein, which is, he's not the first, but he's probably the worst. And the next term of Obama isn't really so much, Marxist as it's a weird combination of Marxism, Sunni Muslim, Islam, and more than ever, just corporatism, just global corporatism and bankerism, where the bankers own everything and the population basically becomes 21st century scientific feudal serfs. They want us to all be serfs. No private property, no land ownership, no income, devalue our currency, and I think there is going to be a bank holiday. It may be short, but guarantee one of their schemes they can do to make the debt go bye-bye is to simply devalue the currency, maybe to 1 in 4, so your dollar is worth 25 cents and
I'm
it's already lost.
40% devaluation and leaving off 60.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think so. I think something like that is very probable. But remember, we've already had a 40% devaluation in effect of the currency in the last 4 years of Obama's administration. If you have value in your house,
they want more.
They want another 40%, which means the dollar will be worth maybe 20 cents on the dollar it was in 2008.
Right. Well, I now have a confidential source inside the banking community, and I'll be getting weekly reports from this individual.
Yeah, so in other words, get your food, your water, your bullets, because when social chaos hits, when the so-called entitlements that Obama promised all the people that wanted to be at the table, guess what? You can be at the table, but Obama's table, there's very little on the table. welcome back. And John, you mentioned a very important statement on the break there, and I have my sources from Western journalism. We had Carl Gallups on last week, and our source inside the White House. Tell us what you heard from someone inside.
My source is inside the Special Operations community. This Tuesday, a couple of days ago, I was told that the whole setup in Benghazi was to have our ambassador be kidnapped. That was the plan, to have him kidnapped, a contrived kidnapping, if you will, and then exchange him for the blind sheikh. And apparently, these American former Navy SEALs that were not part of the program, they just knew our guys were in trouble. They thought they were going to the rescue, and they ended up gumming up the whole works and stopping the kidnapping, which became obviously the death of the ambassador.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Well, that's crazy, and it flies in the face. Our American policy is to never, ever negotiate with terrorists, and that would set a very, very dangerous precedent, especially in light of them having set up and contriving it from the beginning.
Yeah. In fact, here's what I think. Also, additional details. I had our sources from Western journalism and Carl Gallups, who did the video with Jerry McLaughlin and Clean TV. What really happened there was this was to make Obama grandstand before the election, like the Rambo, in the Situation Room, with the killing quote. Taking the shot, as he says, Obama says, taking the shot against Osama bin Laden, who was long dead years before. And what they want to do is look good to the Muslims by giving them the blind shake, look good to the local people, say, hey, look what we did. Also get rid of so-called ambassador. And it's funny they call him an ambassador because he's really basically a go-between, making sure all the equipment material went to 90-95% of these al-Qaeda terrorists that were attacking Syria and killing citizens and military inside Syria doing regime change. And I think what happened is that Ambassador Stevens is getting nervous because they're giving all these weapons to these al-Qaeda guys. He knows they're taking over the whole area. He said it in his cables. The people took him to the emergency department. Now, if I was a terrorist, I'd light him with gasoline or I'd shoot him in the head. I sure as hell wouldn't be taking him to emergency department because he's dying of smoke inhalation.
Totally out of character. Totally
right. So, and Petraeus had this Damocles sword hanging over him until after the election that you better say the party line. So he comes out with a statement yesterday, which I find pretty disgusting, that he knew all along it was a terrorist activity and didn't know who changed the talking points in the White House. So, of course, then they're going to try to chase that rabbit trail. The real issue is Petraeus himself would probably have communications directly with Obama if he knew this was the situation. And Petraeus and his staff and the CIA would have had direct personal action on whether or not they were going to deploy forces. They could have been there in an hour because here's what happened. This is my kind of timeline analysis. What probably happened is all these cables are going on for several months, including the hole blown in the wall that was big enough to let people through. Stevens is getting nervous, and he's decided we got to get rid of this brown shirt, our own guy, who's kind of getting nervous about the whole deal because this is a scam, right? Giving all these weapons to our so-called potential terrorists, not allies but enemies. And so they said, well, we'll exchange them and we'll look good. And what happened? There were two special forces agents there that started to shoot back, and they weren't in on the loop. And so the guys that are, quote, working on this scam to kidnap him decide, well, we're just going to come back and we're going to bring a mortar to the place. So they decided to mortar it when he was in the secure room dying of smoke inhalation, and they eventually took him out of there. They brought him to the emergency department, and it's most likely it's the same guys or affiliates of them that brought him to emergency and said, well, gee, this guy's dying, we want to help him. It wasn't just local citizens. I guarantee it was part of the collective of people in the area that were working with al-Qaeda that were getting all these weapons because they were transshipping it through this so-called facility. This is not an embassy. This is a transshipment facility to gather weapons that they had in Libya and ship them to Syria and to Hezbollah, etc., in southern Lebanon.
Exactly. Dr. Deagle, this is Alexander Bachman. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Alexander. Yeah.
Just to interject for a second. Exactly. I mean, embassies, you have them in the capital city of Tripoli, right?
Yeah, you didn't have an embassy in Benghazi. Benghazi has been known as a pirate capital for 5,500 years. It's played, in southern Mediterranean. You go back to ancient history, even before the Greeks. It was known as the pirate capital of the southern Mediterranean. So,
the city of Tripoli, right?
Yeah. So, and Benghazi was known as the capital of the pirates.
But it's about the ritual
pirates.
killing of the ritual killing. It's on longitudinal, on parallel line 33. All right, same as L.A. Same as north of Jerusalem in Galilee. It's parallel 33. That's why they do these killings, like in Dallas when they killed Kennedy. It's for a ritual purpose as well.
Yeah, well, it's long ley lines, which are basically hyperdimensional lines because they do this to have an effect in hyperspace, which allows them to get psychic energy to do more evil. Without getting into all the details of that. So, John, what do you think of that thesis? Does that make any sense?
Well, it makes perfect sense. It sounds like a B-grade movie out of Hollywood.
Yeah, and it's also they want to clear out General Allen, who's supposed to get the appointment for the commander. And by the way, both these generals did a pretty good job, although I think Petraeus kind of suffered from a little bit of narcissism, too, because he had what he called government in a box. So he would go in and he would control the area, try to, tell people everything. The Al-Qaeda's gone. Don't worry if you're collaborating with us. They won't come back and kill you. Build schools and do things and then kind of leave. Well, that doesn't work very well. I call it McGovernment or government in a box. And they didn't have government even in Kabul. So why do they think that putting hundreds of billions of dollars in to do this on a temporary basis is going to get rid of the Pashtun and the Al-Qaeda and these armies that have never been defeated since Genghis Khan? I mean, it's just stupid. It doesn't work.
Absolutely. It is.
I mean, it's like getting rid of cockroaches and say, well, just pick off one or two. We won't get the vast army of cockroaches in the walls. It doesn't work.
I have this eerie feeling I'm going to throw by you guys. What if General Petraeus is the fall guy for the impeachment trial?
Well, I think what will happen is that, first off, Petraeus, his answers already are even more inconsistent now. The fact that he says he already knew it was serious, how could he know that all these statements are coming out through the so-called U.S. United Nations ambassador, Rice, who's making these statements, and her answer was, well, these are just what they gave me. I'm thinking, well, then who gave him those updated talking points? In either way, was it Valerie Jarrett? Was it Petraeus? I mean, who did it? And if he knew these were coming out, why didn't he come out and Petraeus and correct them? Because this was a minefield, because they knew already they'd screwed up in not deploying troops there. They screwed up with the cover-up, and what was really going on there was something much more nasty. And it goes right up to the president, because he was going to get all the kudos if they exchanged the now kidnapped ambassador for the blind sheikh. And that's what I hear from my sources, too, that Obama is on the hot seat, and it wouldn't surprise me if he gets impeached.
Well, they could try, but ultimately they would, to not let more information get out, they would even his handlers, the puppet masters, they'd go and sacrifice him,
Well, I think that what I heard from my sources is that the handlers are still extremely ticked off that he cut off the XL pipeline. In fact, the globalists, and this is also heard through Lindsey Williams, they wanted that pipeline done because they have a timeline when they want all this oil to come on board, which is about a year and a half from now, with the Liberty rig. The largest, deepest water rig in the world. It cost $2 billion just to put it up there. The largest, deepest water rig in basically Prudhoe Bay, which is like in the Arctic Ocean.
Yes, I know.
When this comes in, and the oil and the gas and everything in America, we have so much more oil than the whole rest of the world. We'll be like the Arabs in the north. I mean, this is ridiculous that we have any debt at all. So, Obama's in the way, and the globalists are ticked off at him, and it wouldn't surprise me if they're going to try to take him down, even if he's, quote, elected or selected. They pay their taxes, buying everything. They work hard. They don't get involved with crime. Welcome back, and want to hear your comments, Ann, about this and about also the space weather, earthquakes, volcanoes, whatever else is happening. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. We just had a tremendous explosion on the sun. We don't think it's going to affect the Earth, but there are pictures of it on spaceweather.com. And it is a the sun may become more active. We've had very quiet solar weather for the last 5 or 6 days. Now, the latest news on the remember the Indianapolis explosion? The house that exploded and they caught the house next to it on fire, and then the other houses then were damaged by the blast shock wave or by flying debris.
Yeah.
14 other homes.
Right.
Well, the latest news on that is they still don't know why. And
well, about a year or so ago, we had a meteor shower, and we were suspicious that the meteor shower triggered off by striking a home, I think, on the East Coast. I think it was in Pittsburgh or somewhere on the East Coast, about a year and a half ago. And this may well be a gas explosion, but you'd figure that you've got to always start looking at these anomalous events, because we are having a lot of meteor showers. The last one. What's the latest one that's going on right now?
That's the Taurus. It comes out of the constellation Taurus, the bull. And the strange thing about that is that the meteors are burning up at 1,000 feet instead of 100,000 feet. So people are seeing fireballs.
Okay. That's something that I'm sure that Professor McKinney talked on your show, John, about the red hand of death that was seen at the time of ancient Egypt, at the time of Moses. And Professor McKinney's been talking about this for the last few weeks, which is sulfur balls coming down from the sky from these meteors crossing through the atmosphere at lower altitudes.
Well, nothing like a chunk of rock going faster than the speed of sound to ruin your whole day.
Yeah, 27,000 to 35,000 miles an hour is pretty amazing.
Anyway, there's some 30 investigators continue working on to determine what caused the explosion. But the news on it has dropped to zero. I mean, you really have to search the news now to find out anything. It's just dropped off the grid.
Part of the problem, I think, is also maintenance of equipment. All our infrastructure across America, whether it's highways, roads, waterways, etc., conduits, everything's failing. We know that San Bruno problem was a combination of failing gas lines, but also they had what's called switching mode power supplies, or smart meters, and they actually put electricity down the line to actually test to see if the line was still working. And according to legal action that's going on here in California, it actually triggered off the San Bruno explosion. So, in other words, what I'd ask the question is, were there smart meters on, and when there was a quote, when the smart meter was trying to send data, it actually has to put electricity down into the area. So if there was a rupture of the gas line and building up in a home, then that could trigger off an explosion. It's the ignition. So it could be, I'd say, number one, just a gas rupture. Number two, way out there, maybe an asteroid.
They've ruled out a gas line rupture, and they've ruled out natural gas, and they've ruled out anything electrical. They've ruled out an airplane. They've ruled out anything.
They can't. If they're smart meters, they can't rule out that, because there's enough electricity to trigger off an explosion. In fact, the courts are still dealing with this case here in California in San Bruno, and we actually had a gentleman on about that.
If you look closely at the pictures that are published, what you will see is that where the hole is, it actually went down into the basement. There's no basement left. I mean,
so you know what I'd be suspicious about there? You know what I'd be suspicious then, if the explosion happened from below? Maybe there's a giant pocket of gas that somehow ignited below the building, and it didn't come from above, but it was actually below, because we know that there's gas releases everywhere. Not just in different parts of the country, but all over the world. There's gas accumulating, coming up, like, for example, in the Salton Sea here in California, there's giant releases of hydrogen sulfide and toxic smelly gases, and they're not from dead fish, or they call playa, at the bottom of this now drying up artificial Salton Sea. I think it's gases coming up that are explosive, and if they're accumulating.
There was no odor of gas. Nobody reported any odor of gas. And if you
maybe it didn't accumulate up and seep into the house, but it was down below it.
Well, you still have to have an ignition source. In any case, you look.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just asking questions because, that's really strange, though.
All you see is a fine dust spread out from the impact point. That's all you see.
Really?
Yes.
That's really weird.
You don't see any walls. You don't see any house, and the only thing you see is that there was a fine dust like sand that was spread out from the impact point. Wow.
That's really strange.
That's really strange, and it certainly sounds like a fireball to me. I think one of the meteors from this comet, Elky, is implicated in the Tunguska event in Russia in 1908, 1908.
It has a debris field around it too, right?
Well, they think that a fragment from that comet was the thing that exploded over northern Russia, Siberia.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
The gravel that comes out of the turrets is it's gravelly size, whatever that means, and but it's very hard, and so it would burn lower in the atmosphere than, for instance, the Orionids, which we just went through in October.
Those are more like flying pieces of foam sponge, but the torids are more like real hard, like iron pyrite rocks, I guess would be the better way to describe it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Alexander, what's happening down in Mexico? What's going on with the gathering plans by the Chinese, probably within 8, 10, 12 years, to invade America? What's going on in terms of the drug war down there, and what else do you have to report on?
Well, I believe they just arrested in Guatemala 2 of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's people. What we do have so far in Mexico is that President Felipe Calderon and his entire cabinet, as every 6 years, stole a lot of money from the Mexican people. That means the money that's saved up in the supposed Central Bank of Mexico, which is the real Bank of London of Mexico. That's the real official name, which is a private institution anyhow. The money's not there. So he's leaving the government basically bankrupt, as they do every 6 years. So the new president, who has a diminutive IQ, Enrique Peña Nieto, will be coming in on December 1st into a country that is ultimately destroyed economically. We'll see how Mexico recuperates from this designed bankruptcy in order to trigger a massive devaluation of the peso against the dollar. And basically, we also have this psychosis going on in Mexico City, and in what is the biggest transnational movie chain in Latin America, Cinépolis, basically is having shootings inside their movie theaters right now in Mexico City. It's all this week. Many people have been shot at random during various viewings of different types of movies, and even a baby was shot this week. So
you're kidding, right? It's funny. We never really get news outside of America. It's very myopic about this, and the country's right beside us, Mexico. It also, what happens in Mexico is really going to impinge on America, but Americans seem to be just not paying attention, do they?
Mexico is the appendage of Mystery Babylon, I believe. I mean, what happens in the U.S. is being replicated here. So Mexico is sprouting a new form of left-wing, anti-God, pro-abortion, pro-gay, pro-lesbian attitude. And now we're seeing that society as a whole is collapsing morally and ethically. And you have these random people copycatting, the Black Knight shootings up there in Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah. But, I have a kind of an alternative view. I know that there's elements of society that are kind of manipulating, and even the re-election of Obama, but if we had even any reasonable conservative candidate here, they would have been elected. It's very obvious. The same way in Mexico, the drug war is partly tied directly to the London bankers, etc., so they want to have chaos. But most of the people in Mexico are really pretty conservative. So to me, in other words, I don't buy that the idea that society is going down the toilet. They want to tell us that, so we'll buy into it. Welcome back, and you mentioned on the break something really remarkable, Alexander, that the population of Tijuana, which is just south of the U.S.-Mexican border, is around population 2 million, floating population 3 million, and a quarter of the population are addicted to drugs, including this latest drug from Russia called crocodile, that even has gasoline in it. I mean, I consider drugs a form of eugenics. And I don't want legalized drugs. What I do want is not prosecution and imprisonment of people that use them. I want it medicalized so people get tested, and if they're positively tested for it, they then get put into therapy. It's real simple. This is what they did in British Columbia, and they discovered it years ago. This is the way you approach it. You don't approach it with a legal system with guys with flak jackets banging down doors and everything. What you do is you go after the drug distributors with even more aggressiveness. You bring in special forces in Delta with the help of the countries like Colombia and Mexico and elsewhere, and you go after the guys with incredible aggressiveness, shutting down bank accounts and doing other things, rather than the fourth richest man in the world is living in Mexico, one of the largest drug dealers on the planet, And when you tell me a quarter of the population just south of the border is addicted, this is genocide. That's what that is. And
it is.
Any country that does this,
as young as 11, 12, distributing inside schools.
And by the way, people say that marijuana is safe. I beg to differ. Marijuana nowadays is like Afghanistan black hash on steroids. These new versions of marijuana, are medical marijuana especially, are with all their delta-9 THC concentrations and other cannabinoids. You could eliminate the hallucinogenic ones, and they have a drug called Kemet in Canada used for nausea and cancer and so on. But people don't want that. They don't want medical marijuana where basically the hallucinogens are removed, or the things that literally cause you to feel like you get sensory motor changes or judgment distance changes that can make you dangerous operating equipment or a vehicle. That's why I think this idea of states like Colorado doing it and saying, well, we're going to do a blood test when you kill somebody in a car, I think it's stupid. And I think it's uninformed people that make the idea that thinking that we just need to make drugs legal, like this moron Jesse Ventura. And Jesse Ventura, to me, is a big-mouth idiot when he makes statements that everybody should have the liberty to do anything they want as long as it's, quote, not a crime against anybody else. If you're trying to commit suicide, you need to be committed. If you're drug addicted and you're driving your body, which will affect your family, your fellow citizens, people operating equipment, anything, your behavior, you could be having a hallucinogenic fugue and have a weapon on you. Or you're not a weapon, just a broken bottle. I mean, you can't have people walking around stoned.
The influence is considered a crime.
And by the way, I also think that the same thing needs to be done with legal drugs, because legal drugs can be just as dangerous, things like benzos, etc., as these illegal ones. And we need to deal with that issue of medicalizing it and stop criminalizing it. But the criminals that distribute, they need to get either in jail or dead.
Well, in Russia, the epidemic of this new substance, because they can't afford heroin anymore, it's crocodile with K, crocodile. You just go on YouTube and do a little research on crocodile. You'll find out what it is, because the skin of the addict turns into it looks green and starts falling off by pieces, okay?
Oh, wow.
You start dying from the inside out. You start rotting out. And basically, it's a codeine mix. It's a synthetic opiate. And
I pulled it up.
Yeah, they grab codeine, gasoline, paint thinner, iodine, hydrochloric acid, and red phosphorus from the striking pad of matchboxes. See, they mix all that stuff and they inject it into their veins.
Yeah, it's called desomorphine. And it's an opiate invented in 1932 in the United States as a derivative of morphine, where 6-hydroxyl group has been removed and the 7-8 double bond has been reduced. It's a sedative, analgesic, and around 8 times more potent than morphine. Oh my gosh.
Yes, and that's why we have so many people jumping across the border buying OxyContin in Mexico without any prescription and then taking it into the States. I mean, this is an epidemic waiting, a drug pandemic waiting to happen. I mean, it's horrible. If you really see the cases in Tajikistan and all the Stan countries, you know, north of Afghanistan and west of Afghanistan and everything inside southern Russia, this thing, if it hits America and the streets of the United States, say bye-bye to the future generations. This thing kills in 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, the street name in Russia is homemade desomorphine. It's crocodile, Krokodil. Reported due to scale-like appearance of skin in all users and derivative of the chlorocodide. Due to difficulties procuring heroin combined with easy and cheap access to the over-the-counter pharmacy products containing codeine, use of crocodile has been on the increase. Since the homemade mix is routinely injected immediately with little or no future purification, crocodile has been notorious for producing severe tissue damage, phlebitis, gangrene, sometimes requiring limb amputation or long-term users. It's the amount of tissue damage is so high that addicts' life expectancies are said to be as low as 2 to 3 years, especially as they are often highly susceptible to infections and gangrene due to widespread HIV among injecting drug users in Russia. Well, of course, the Russian population are dying from drug addiction. If you go to Moscow, and I've talked to people that have been there recently, it's just over the top. So this idea of people legalizing drugs, you're an idiot, and you need to talk to someone like me, who's a drug expert with the MRO, that knows that someone is addicted, like this moron Jesse Ventura, and he needs to get a real-life idea that you cannot commit suicide. You cannot be walking around stoned on your either medical drugs or on illegal drugs and think it's okay to the rest of society to tolerate that. We need to take care of you. We need to get you off the drugs, and we need to monitor. And if you medicalize it, you don't put people in prison, expose other criminals, and turn them into a criminal and expand the criminal drug cartels. And you don't go and sell the damn stuff and thinking, well, medical marijuana, which will always goes up. As soon as you legalize it, the abuse of it and the population becomes totally, you get a percentage of people that get totally stoned on it and don't function. Your comments, John?
Well, there's different ways to look at this. People who are determined to cause harm to themselves will do so regardless of what government intervention is attempted. That's
real simple.
That's as old as the hills.
I'll give you an example. When we had employees of different companies, and that we were Staples or Office Depot or Department of Defense or whatever, they do a urine drug screen. We do it. We actually monitor. We have a chain of custody. We have urine tests. We have breath tests, etc. You can't fiddle us. I had people do it. You wouldn't believe some of the scams. It was so ridiculous. People come in and said, let's put it this way. I had people come in and I have to do a post-MRL positive drug screen, and they'd say, well, da-da-da-da-da. I said, just a second now. Just assume now, I'm not Dr. Bill Deagle. I'm the omniscient God. I'm literally the God of the universe. I have drug tests here that tell me right down to the molecular basis of how you're living. And so no amount of lying will get you out of this. I said, you don't know the biochemistry. You don't know how long it stays in your body. You're guilty. That's just the end of it. There's no discussion here. You can't lie your way out of this. So if we simply did drug testing in schools and employers and other places, and then we monitored people who were positive for these things like benzoyl, agonine for cocaine, and crocodile and so on, we'd have health officials and public health nurses visiting them. We then have health authorities, if necessary, taking them off in an ambulance in a posy jacket to a drug rehab facility where they'd be taken care of. We just need to decide to do it instead of, oh, well, we don't want to take away their liberty. When you get heavily involved with crocodile, which is going to cause amputations, we need to deal with that. We have that choice and making them normal citizens again, or we have the choice to stick them in a prison situation, which becomes a permanent ward of the state. It's our choice. What do we do? And I think we have a choice, and we can treat people like human beings that have went over the edge and need help. And that, to me, is a much more logical solution than making drugs legal. By the way, also crazy are, I call these new things like Halo 2 and these other new video games, I consider them electronic drugs. Your comments, John and Ann and Alexander.
Well, if you watch people that are using these games, it is almost a form of hypnosis, the expressions on their faces. It's very dangerous stuff.
They go into theta rhythm. If you measure their blood levels, you'll find they get a surge of dopamine every time they do a kill. So what happens is these people are like the little rat pressing the little bar with the electrode stuck in the rage control and dopamine surge centers in their brain. They're just as addicted as somebody sticking a needle in their arm. People say, oh, no, they're not addicted. I said, you don't understand the Skinner box and the process of operant conditioning. These highly intense video games are changing the brain structure of people. They're changing their brain structure. They're changing the we call the reward response system. They're changing oxytocin levels. They're changing steroid levels. They're changing everything. They're actually electronic drugs. And if we don't call it that, we're going to have a generation not only addicted to things like aspartame and GMO, but addicted to this stuff.
No, already it's out of control. I mean, I'm preparing a special conference. I'm going to be lecturing in L.A. It's called Manipulati, and how video games and all this and the media and the mass media affect the brain structure. I mean, the brain structure of children is being modified by design. Remember, it's about creating the new unsensitized human, the drone class of...
well, we see that with the politics. We get offered a Punch and Judy game. I call it the Dance of the Fairies, because all high-level politicians are bisexual pedophiles. And then they pick out which fairy we are going to have for the next few years while they do whatever policy they want.
Well, CFR Illuminati member Angelina Jolie is bisexual, so she'll probably end up as a senator in the future.
Oh, boy. Amazing.
Well, Dr. Bill, this is the Liberty Man signing off.
Yeah, listen to